Hello and welcome to AFL Podcasts, the home of objective, up-to-date and independent reporting on Turkey. Don't forget to follow our reports through social media, on aflnews.com or through our mobile app. Let's get started.
Hello, our listeners. Today we have Edward Stafford as a guest to talk about Turkish-US relations. Edward Stafford is a retired officer from the US Foreign Service, and actually his last overseas assignment was as a counselor for political and military affairs in Ankara between 2011 and 2014. Hi, Edward.
Hi, Elhan. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you so much for coming on the program today. Primarily, I want to discuss about the hearings from last week. But before getting that, I just like to get your take on about the meetings today in Washington. For those who don't know, it is the annual meeting of the American Turkish Council. It is basically the biggest and largest and the most important events between the two countries, heavily involved with the defense firms and the contracts. This year, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar is here to attend, as well as Turkish Economy Minister Berat Albayrak, also the Mr. Erdogan's son-in-law. There are some remarks already published all over the media, Edward. So I want to ask you, how did you find this tone of this remark coming out from the top Turkish officials?
Well, I found the comments about the defense minister Hulusi Akar, to be, I think they were called conciliatory, and I think they were. Hulusi Akar, when he was in uniform, actually served at least twice, I believe it was twice, as in what we call NATO billets, meaning he was assigned to a couple of different positions. I believe one was in Italy. In fact, maybe both were in Italy. I'm not quite sure about that. But, so he understands the value of NATO. And so I think he's trying to make it clear that even if Turkey were to go ahead with the S-400 system from Russia, that is not Turkey turning its back on NATO, and it shouldn't be seen as Turkey turning its back on NATO. However, I don't know if that is going to resonate very well with many people in the U.S. Congress who have, I think, a less generous attitude towards Turkey's acquisition of Russian air defense systems. So
I understand. So let me do one more quick follow-up on this one. What is your opinion? Do you think that Turkey can get away by buying Russian system, as well as staying in NATO without getting some kind of sanctions or punishment?
I think at this point it has gotten to be, in some ways, the decision about that has been taken out of the hands of the U.S. administration. Usually foreign policy decisions are run by the president and his administration, but there are very many members of Congress who are very upset with Turkey, and in many ways they see the S-400 as the final, the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. I mean, they're looking back at all sorts of other issues that have been challenging between Turkey and the United States. There's the case of Andrew Brunson, who was incarcerated as all the senators and congressmen really believe that unfairly, and he was eventually released. But that took some doing, and then the continuing incarceration of a dual national, Serkan Golke, and then some embassy staff people. So there's that. Then there's, of course, the ongoing fact that Turkey has more journalists in prison than any other country in the world. Then there's the issue of respect for the rights of ethnic minorities, that in this case, the Kurds. So there's a number of areas of friction between the United States and Turkey, and there are people who are very glad to use the purchase of the S-400 to really put a very strong block to U.S. Turkish cooperation, and to use the threat, which I don't think is just an idle threat, of suspending Turkey's participation in the F-35 program. And so I'm not sure that Defense Minister Ankara are going to resonate with those people.
You are saying that Defense Minister Akar's remarks might not resonate with the Washington decision makers. I think we will follow this very closely. Actually, there are so many questions and follow-up I can do on this subject. Perhaps we can do that in near future, but I want to go back to last Thursday. David Satterfield, the nominee to become the next U.S. ambassador, if confirmed at the Senate, last week we wanted to highlight that he challenged Turkey to uphold its domestic and international human rights commitments, and called on Turkey to live up in full its status as a NATO ally. But at the same time, I'm going to ask your comment on this question. That confirmation hearing expected to be little more tougher, considering in 2014, than John Bass' confirmation hearing, then the senator, senior senator with McCain, was still very well remembered. So it was a very difficult confirmation hearing last time around, and things were not as bad as today in Turkey. But how was last week's hearing? How did you find it? Was it a tough one, or?
Well, I actually found it a little surprising how gentle the members of the Senate were with Ambassador Satterfield. There are contentious issues between the United States and Turkey, and these hearings, they're not usually used to beat up the nominee, but they're used by the senators to highlight foreign policy issues and possibly disagreements the Senate has with the executive branch, with the president, about the foreign relations policy between the United States and the country to which an ambassador is being sent, in this case, Turkey. And I was actually surprised by two things. One, they were using this hearing was not only Ambassador Satterfield, which I would have expected given how important Turkey is in U.S. foreign relations and on the global stage, and also how long there's been an absence of an ambassador of the United States to Turkey. And then also the fact that there are contentious issues between the two countries. So I would have expected a hearing for David Satterfield alone. But in fact, he was joined in a hearing for a political appointee nominee as the ambassador to Dublin, and then a career foreign service officer like David Satterfield as an ambassador to North Macedonia. Well, by having all three of them, that kind of limits the amount of time the members of the Senate have to ask questions, and it's the hearing. It's not the full Senate. It's just a committee, the Foreign Relations Committee. So he wasn't really hit with a lot of questions. Again, the questions wouldn't be so much against him, but they would be challenging the administration, the Trump administration's dealings with Turkey. And yet, I was looking through the testimony and then listening to it, and I was struck that there was really very little. There was very little coming in that were difficult questions.
Why do you think so? I mean, was it the intention, or it was just a crowded day at the Senate, and some of the senators, such as Rubio and Durbin, just could not make it to the meeting?
Well, I think actually it probably has to do with the fact that the Senate and the White House and the State Department are probably coming to consensus on the way forward with Turkey. And by that, I mean that there is no longer any difference between the approach by the White House, State Department, Department of Defense, and the Senate about what to do if Turkey goes ahead with the S-400. In the past, there was some members of the Senate and Department of Defense about what to do if the S-400 is acquired by Turkey. I mean, what is the impact on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program if Turkey gets the S-400s? I think what's going on now is that there is no disagreement whatsoever. There's between the White House, State Department, Department of Defense, and the Senate about the way forward, and that way forward is to suspend the F-35 program. In some ways, that's not surprising because obviously the U.S. is going to have more success, most of us believe, with its foreign policy messaging if everybody is on the same page to deliver the same message. And I think that would mean that there's no need to highlight the differences between the Senate and the administration, the Trump administration, because there no longer are significant differences. I mean, the only thing that came up in which there was any sort of disagreement was the question raised by Senator Menendez about Armenian genocide, and in that the Trump administration still does not refer to the atrocities of 1915 to 1923 as a genocide, and Senator Menendez does. But that was the only area where there was any sort of contention. I mean, when Menendez again raised the issue of all the journalists who are incarcerated, Ambassador Satterfield made it quite clear that is a major priority for the United States to raise with the Turkish government, that this is this almost attack on journalism in the free press in Turkey is a major concern, and not the sort of thing that a NATO ally should be doing. That NATO has kind of certain shared values, and one of them is freedom of the press and democratic norms. So I think it may actually reflect the fact that there's not much difference now within the Trump administration with the Senate about the way forward if Turkey does get the S-400.
I understand. And we will most likely know whether Turkey really even though has been confirming all those different Turkish officials that no turning back. I think many in this Turkish-U.S. relation working as an observer, looking and still thinking whether there will be a U-turn, because I think the importance of the decision and potential implications of the decisions looming large right now. Going back to the Satterfield testimony, I know that you inspected very thoroughly and you look at his testimony. How do you think the tone of the testimony was? I mean, do you think ambassador still hit all the right tones, or did he miss any big opportunity about the Turkey?
No, I don't. I think he did quite well. I mean, he, in his prepared statement, he mentioned all the kind of the sensitive issues, the contentious issues between the United States and Turkey, but he didn't, in a sense, harp on them, which is to say, he didn't try to paint Turkey into a very negative light. He just made it clear in kind of a statement of fact way that there are disagreements between the United States and Turkey on some very, very important issues. But in no way was he trying to say that, well, this is Turkey's fault, not ours. It was simply saying, these are the facts of the matter. And I think it was a very, in many ways, respectful tone towards Turkey. Not to be, that's to be expected from David Satterfield. He's almost 40 years as a career diplomat. And so he has a great deal of background, and he knows how to phrase things properly, so that he's not giving offense to the country to which he will be sent, and at the same time he is answering as best he can the questions being put to him by the senators. So, for example, just to give you one of the things that he says in his statement, his prepared statement at the beginning was, no democracy can flourish without a vibrant, diversely owned, and free press. Now, he's not, saying that the Turkish government is wrong to have so much control over the press. He's simply saying, he's stating it in a positive way, that it is really valuable for a democracy to have a free press that is vibrant and has a diversity of ownership, so there's not one political faction or another. Now, this is based on his experience of over 35 years working in countries that were, striving with that issue. So again, he presents it in a positive way, but he also makes clear that the United States' opinion on this is that to be a really thriving democracy, you have to have a vibrant free press in which the ownership is in many different hands, so that you don't get too much control of the press by one segment or one element of society.
Understand. Thank you so much. And my, I think, closing question would be, should we expect him to confirm next week or very soon?
I don't know about the timeline. One of the things facing the Senate is that they will be going off on in what's called Easter break. Well, it's no longer called Easter break, of course. It's now called spring break, but it's for the Easter holiday. So I'm not sure if they're going to be available for a vote that quickly. But I do believe that the fact that he was packaged with two other nominees who are going to go through very speedily really raises, I think, a good possibility that he will be, one, confirmed quickly, and instead of it being a debated issue on the floor of the Senate, it will simply be done by acclamation. Just, it'll be, is there any objection? There'll be no objections, and then And so it'll actually be recorded if this happens, which I think it will be recorded that he was confirmed with unanimous consent, which
Uh-huh.
6 months ago I would not have predicted. But I think what's happened is I think that the position of the Trump administration and of the Senate regarding Turkey have actually come closer. And I think the way he was treated in the hearings and being packaged with two other nominees, I think this indicates that, in fact, the Senate doesn't have a lot of difficulty with the current Trump administration foreign policy towards Turkey.
Okay, thank you so much. And I am hoping that we can continue this talk when closer to this S-400 decision. It seems like we will see the final decision on this and how it will unfold very soon.
Yes. Okay, I look forward to it.
Bye-bye.